You're about to hear a story that sounds like it's straight out of a spy novel. It's got espionage, it's got national pride, and it's got a truly mind-boggling amount of money that, well, it just disappeared. So let's start with the number at the very heart of this thing, 1.9 billion euros. That's over 2 billion US dollars. This was the amount of cash that was supposed to be sitting safely in a bank account. Supposed to be. And that's where we get to the core of the mystery. See, the money wasn't just stolen or lost. The real terrifying question is, what if it was never there in the first place? To really understand how this all went down, we're actually going to start at the end, at the exact moment this whole house of cards came crashing down. Okay, so picture this. It's June 18th, 2020. You're in a sleek, glass-walled boardroom in Munich, the headquarters of a company called Wirecard. The air is just thick with tension. Auditors from Ernst & Young have been hounding the CEO, a guy named Markus Braun, for months, demanding proof that this 1.9 billion euros actually exists. He's sworn it does. Well, today is the final deadline.
The auditors, they finally had enough. They made a direct call to the banks in the Philippines where all this money was supposedly being held. And the answer they got back? Whoa. It was an absolute bombshell. It wasn't that the money was gone. The bank managers flat out told them the accounts themselves were a total fabrication. They never existed. And in that one moment, the whole illusion just shattered.
So how on earth did a company built on such a colossal lie become one of Germany's most celebrated tech champions? To get that, we need to rewind the clock. You know, when you think of Germany, you think of an industrial powerhouse, cars, machinery. But in the age of the internet, they kind of felt left behind by Silicon Valley. They were desperate for a tech giant of their own. And Wirecard, well, Wirecard was meant to be the answer. Now, it got its start processing payments for some pretty shady online businesses, gambling, porn, that kind of thing. But it cleaned up its image and was presented as Germany's great tech hope, a true rival to companies like PayPal. Now, the company was run by two guys who were like night and day. You had Markus Braun, the CEO. He was the public face, the intellectual visionary in a black turtleneck, always talking in these grand terms about the future of digital payments. And then you had Jan Marsalek, the COO. He was the operator, the guy in the shadows. We're talking private jets, meetings with mercenaries. People who met him literally described him as a real-life Bond villain. And their whole act? It worked like a charm. By 2018, Wirecard was valued at an incredible 24 billion euros. It got so big and powerful that it actually kicked one of Germany's oldest, most prestigious banks out of the DAX 30. That's their main stock index. They were, for all intents and purposes, on top of the world. But behind that incredible $24 billion valuation was a deception that was, in its own way, kind of brilliant. It was all built around something they called the perfect black box, and this was the real heart of the fraud. So the whole scheme hinged on this concept they called third-party acquirers, or TPAs. The story went like this. Wirecard claimed it couldn't operate directly in certain Asian markets, so it had to use these partners to process payments for them. These partners would then collect all the revenue and hold on to it in special escrow accounts. Here's exactly how they pulled it off, in 4 pretty simple steps. First, Wirecard would just announce these massive profits coming from their Asian partners. Second, they'd book all that partner money right onto their own official balance sheets. Third, and this is the absolute key, they made it completely impossible for anyone to actually look inside these partner companies. It was a total black box. And finally, whenever the auditors asked for proof, Jan Marsalek and his team would just cook up some forged documents and hand them over.
But a lie that big, it's bound to spring a leak eventually. And pretty soon, a small group of journalists started asking questions, kicking off a battle that felt less like accounting and more like a spy thriller.
Enter Dan McCrum, a journalist at the Financial Times. Around 2015, he started looking at Wirecard's numbers and thought, something's off here. Their growth was just too perfect. It was this perfect, smooth, upward line, quarter after quarter with no hiccups. And in the real world of business, that almost never happens. So the FT launched this incredible investigative series they called House of Wirecard, just methodically laying out the case that the company's profits were completely fake. So how did Wirecard respond? Did they open up their books to prove the numbers were real? Nope. They declared all-out war. And I'm not exaggerating, they hired private investigators, former spies, to physically stalk the journalists. They surveilled investors who were betting against the company's stock. They even accused the reporters themselves of being criminals who were just trying to manipulate the market. And this is where the story gets truly absurd. Germany's top financial regulator, an agency called BaFin, what did they do? They didn't investigate the multi-billion-dollar company being accused of massive fraud. No. They investigated the journalists who were exposing it. They actually filed criminal complaints against them. You see, for Germany, Wirecard had become this symbol of national pride, and the establishment chose to protect its champion rather than face a very ugly truth. But the Financial Times just did not let up. The reporting was relentless, and the pressure kept building and building. Eventually, the auditors at EY, who, by the way, had been signing off on these fake books for a decade, they just couldn't ignore the mountain of red flags anymore. They finally made the one demand that Wirecard couldn't fake their way out of. They said, "We're done with your documents. We are going to call the bank directly." And that one simple phone call, well, that was all it took to bring a $24 billion empire crashing down in just a matter of days. And that brings us right back to where we started. The call is made, the bank managers in the Philippines confirm everything. The official-looking letters, the bank statements, the stamps, the signatures, it was all fake. That 1.9 billion euros, which was about a quarter of the company's entire value, it had never existed. It was a ghost. The collapse after that was just breathtakingly fast. On day one, the company is forced to admit that the money can't be found. Just 4 days later, the CEO Markus Braun resigns and is arrested. And by day 7, just 1 week later, the entire company, once the pride of German tech, files for bankruptcy. It's over. For the investors, the impact was absolute devastation. The stock price didn't just fall, it completely evaporated. It plunged 99%. Billions of dollars in retirement funds and people's personal savings were just wiped out almost overnight. So what happened to the two masterminds? Well, Markus Braun, the CEO, was arrested, and he's currently sitting in a German prison awaiting the final verdict of his trial. But Jan Marsalek, the Bond villain COO, he just vanished. He faked his own entry records into the Philippines to throw people off, but he actually boarded a private jet to Belarus. Today, intelligence agencies believe he was a Russian asset the entire time and is probably hiding out in Moscow under state protection. The whole Wirecard saga is just this stunning lesson in how easily we can all be blinded by a good story, by a rising stock price, by a sense of national pride. We saw a guy who looked like a genius in a black turtleneck, and we just assumed he had to be telling the truth. When you strip away all the complicated finance, the ultimate lesson from this $2 billion illusion is actually a pretty simple and powerful idea. The people behind these massive frauds, they aren't financial wizards. They aren't smarter than you. They're just lying to you.